I will call to order the ALPR meeting for Tuesday, July 28th. I'll call it to order at this time. We will start with the roll call.
Blessum,
Here.
Collum,
Here.
Hancock,
Here.
Janser,
Here.
Nason.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, continuing on, we'll have the police department come forward and give us an implementation update. So, Justin, looks like you've got that today.
Chairman Blessum and members of the committee. So I have just a quick snapshot slide that will just kind of show you where we have been, where we are, and kind of a little bit of a high level usage as of right now.
Perfect. You're good.
So on June, I believe it was 18th, is when we turned on the rest of the cars. And so we had one car on for testing purposes and to figure out our policy and procedure and to make sure that we weren't missing any gaps in regards to our policy and internal procedures. And so prior to that, we had one car. As of June 18th, we have turned on the rest of the fleet except for 3 cars. Sure.
Just
Last time it was plug and play.
sorry.
Okay.
I was seeing something.
Okay.
Okay. Chairman Blessing, the rest of the committee. So as you can see, here's a snapshot of our overview of where we are to this point. So on June 18th, we turned on the rest of the cars. The 3 cars that are not turned on are the result of different things. One is we have a crash car where a citizen had hit us, and so that car is out of service, and so that system is not on. And then we have another car where that car is assigned to the officer, and she was away extended training, so she has not been trained yet, so we did not turn that car on. And the other one, we had one extra car that we had a matter of 4 different officers for different reasons that weren't trained. And so if they were to be on the road, they were directed to use that car because the system is not on. So that leaves us with the rest of the fleet has been turned on, which leaves us at the 23 cars that have been turned on since mid-June. So as you can see by our recent actions, and so And it kind of explains that in regards to what I just said in regards to vehicles are not turned on. The vast majority of our staff has been trained. We've now implemented the training in our in-house training process, so any new hire goes through the ALPR training before they even hit the FTO phase out in the field, so they receive that as part of their initial baseline traffic stop training. The system use overview, so we had done, this is as of Friday, we had done 5 search requests. 4 of those were authorized. One we felt like was asked the deputy chief. He felt like it did not meet our policy, so that one was denied. But we have done 4 searches. No results as a result of any of those searches. When you go down that box on the upper right, where we talk about multiple hit list hits, those are all hits that in some way the system says, take a closer look at this license plate. Those were all plates that if it said ABC 1, 2, 3, the system said this is a hit. But when the officer looks at it, because that's part of the policy, is officer verification, that was an actual either misread or it was from another state. So it's not an actual hit that matched what was in front of them. But we're seeing between 30 and 40 of those on a rolling 7-week basis of where the system is telling, hey, the officer, you need to look closer at this as hot list hits. As a result of that, I think there's a varying different reasons. And so as you can see, that number is going to vary, but approximately 100,000 plates are read per week by the overall fleet in regards to what each of those 23 cars are seeing on any given out in the field type usage. And so I can get into longer term priorities and kind of what's next, but I'll kind of leave it at that point as far as where we're currently at with the system.
Okay. Any questions so far? Do that?
Yeah, on the hot list, is there anything that, I understand, NCIC maybe mismatches, whatever. How many roughly items has the PD entered manually?
So we have entered 0 at this point.
0, okay.
Well, I should say we've created 0 customizable hot lists for the department. That doesn't include anything. We normally would have put an NCIC with a stolen vehicle and things like that. That would have automatically went there, but we've done 0 at this point. Part of the goal, and it's been very clear with our staff, is let's make sure that we're on point with our process as of now of turning things on before we start looking at the back end of how do we manage a customizable list that would still fit within our policy. And the one thing I should also clarify, which was important when we turned the system on, what we did find is we know a lot of the concern was who does searches and underneath the authorization, things like that. What we did find is that we have turned on all the cars, but the officers themselves, outside the people that authorize to do searches, can't even access the search feature. So they do not have an ALPR function that even shows up for them to search the system. Even though their car is running, they cannot go and look for anything within that 7 days as part of the search. At most, the best they would see is a snapshot of what their car has ran that day because it's constantly running within those hits. So that's the most that any officer can see on their level, which we did find out as soon as we turned on the system.
Okay. Other questions, committee? Okay, Justin, just a couple there. So on and again, we don't need to go into a lot of details. I'm encouraged by the idea that there were some search requests that one was deemed to not fit. I think that shows that the policy so far is doing what we intended, and I think that's a good thing. Is it on the one denied? Is there a vague enough way to describe why that was?
I'll have the deputy chief speak to that because it was a request to him.
The narrow definition of what's requested within our policy, it did not match that. So ultimately what it was is a request from another agency without getting in depth in terms of what it was. It was a request from another agency, and we deemed that request didn't fit in line with the policy. It didn't fit our required searches.
Okay, and so Chief, I'll just say this to you and to the rest of the leadership team. You guys know where I'm at on this, but that encourages me. Okay, that's what I want to hear and why this committee is here, because I want to make sure that you're working within hopefully what the residents of Minot are looking for out of this, and that the policy's working. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yep. And then just on the hot list hits, Justin, kind of the same idea. With those, does Axon get feedback on this stuff? Because this is stuff this is pretty known technology at this point. The one thing that gets me, and you guys can tell me how this plays out with an officer, that feels to me like we got 40 adrenaline jumps in our officers that are happening that are erroneous. Like that's when that thing hits, that's like holy smokes, I might have to go get somebody here, right? So can you just talk about that a little bit, and how does Axon take the feedback to try to get better at this stuff?
Yes, I would say, Chairman Bless and rest of the committee, and so I would say yes and no to that, because that hit could have happened when they were making a stop, but it also could have happened as they're simply just driving down a busy area, and they
Yep.
really wouldn't have known where that hit would have come from. Now, what I can do is I can't remember if I showed this, but I can show you just a quick short video of what a hit looks like, and so you have an idea when you say adrenaline hit or the timing of it. Not gonna let me do it. Well, I can see it, but
And that's okay. I think we remember that part. I think the bigger thing for me is just kind of the feedback loop, and whether this is concerning to you at all, that's a little more than I was expecting, especially for a week.
yeah. So, Chairman Blessum, I think every single time they have to say incorrect read, or they have the option to say incorrect read and or wrong state. Those are your two options. One is it might have mistaked as an 0 for a 0 or something like that. That would be an incorrect read. The state would be pretty self-explanatory, right? It's Minnesota plate, North Dakota plate's what's in front of me. So from what I understand, obviously that feedback is actually, yes, it's going back in the system and this is above my head, to help the system and start understanding of where or why that hit was incorrect in some fashion. That's about the most I can explain to as far as what the system is doing when they actually provide the system feedback in regards to why it's an incorrect hit.
Okay. And how are the officers reacting to those? Because what this tells me, have we had real hits that led to something good? I mean, we don't even have to go into detail, but I would assume we have. What I don't want is 40 of them happening and we haven't had anything.
Yeah, and so
That
actually,
gets a little scary.
I surveyed our officers here last week just to ensure when I saw these last numbers, because I can see it's a new system. Maybe they forgot the backside is they have to request that digital piece of evidence from either Lieutenant Dyke, myself, or Captain Wagner to go put that in the case. However, they don't absolutely need that to take action for that side because they have to verify it anyway. So just to make sure that all those were incorrect reads, and I didn't hear any differently that they were any actual hits. And so it very well could have been that all of them were wrong reads or incorrect states. I don't have any reason at this point to believe that there were actual hits off the system.
Okay.
There was no formal request to any of us anyway.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
I have a
Yeah.
comment.
Mike?
The other side of the coin is, I think it's encouraging to know that reinforces the human element, the necessity to check. You don't just assume each and every time that it's right and correct. And that's how this system is supposed to work. There's supposed to be confirmation.
Absolutely, member Nate. And so that was actually a very big point of emphasis during the training, is that human part of it to verify, to ensure we're doing that before any action is taken. That was a very big point of emphasis in the training.
Okay. And Mike, if you could grab the mic when you do talk, just so they catch you. So for whichever one of you can answer it, can you talk? What can you tell us about the 4 searches that were performed? And again, only go as far as you can. I mean, we've been advised legally that we got to be careful about where we go there. What types of things are we using it for so far?
So when we talked about, Chairman Bless and the rest of the committee, and so when we talked about running an audit, the system can provide us any report. This is an example of a report we run of the system that was generated. And so this shows who did the search and what it was for. So the things that are highlighted in green there, I tried to kind of ascertain a little bit to make it a little bit more clear. Those are the 4 searches we're talking about. So there's a duplicate record on 2 of them from Lieutenant Dyke and myself for some reason. What I can tell you is that we each ran the system twice just to tweak it just a little bit, because we start with a search as narrow as possible, and then maybe we take away a make to expand it just a little bit. So there was 2 searches on one case for 2 of us at different points, but it was 4 different cases. And so as you can see, it was 2 of them were for felony vehicles in reference to narcotics, and the 3rd one was narcotics, and the one that I dealt with was in reference to a commercial burglary case. And so those are the types of cases that we did authorize, and there were searches for. And each of these, like I said, provided 0 results. The one that I can tell you that I did a search for, that was when we actually only had 1 car active at the time because it was very, very early on before the rest of the fleet was turned on. But this is an example of the report audit that we can run and what you would see. So for purposes of the meeting, I blocked out some specifics in regards to case number and different types of vehicles that we asked you to search. But this is what the system enables us to do on the backside.
So can you talk a little bit about, as you went through that, you had the one that was with one car just out there, but can you talk about what you were looking for? And so the idea here is, so let's say we have a commercial burglary, we think somebody broke in, maybe somebody saw a car leaving or something. Are you checking to see if that car was in the vicinity? Is that the general idea, or what were you looking for, I guess?
I can tell you that generally that's going to be, for the case that I was associated with and approved and did the search, it's typically that's going to be predominantly what we're trying to do is ascertain, is it in the area? Did we see it out and about? Maybe it was a different part of town, but it was out and about type of thing. If it's, for example, it's at 3 o'clock in the morning, and even if it's not right next to the area, there's not a lot of traffic moving. It just gives an avenue for the investigator, detective, or officer to start looking closer type of thing. So in itself, it's likely going to be tough unless it's being ran right outside where the crime happened, even though it is possible. It's just an avenue to help push the detective one way or another. So in my case, it was there's a potential plate, potential make and model, and you start there and you see what you kind of come up with.
Yeah. And so in that particular case, was it a case of like a make and model? They had a partial plate or had the whole plate? How did that one kind of play out?
Yeah, there was some good information in regards
Okay.
to what they believed it might have been.
Okay. All right.
Does the system, or before this was even turned on, I know anymore, you can track the officer's movements, where the car is, whatever. Is that logged? Whether it's through Axon or the tracking system that dispatch uses to see where the cars are at. Does that keep a log of where the car has been and at what time? So that you can use, say, that log, or within Axon system, does it log, say, in that 8-hour or 10-hour shift that the officer's working, his or her route where they've patrolled that during that shift, so that, say, the next day there is a crime reported, you can say, well, this car was pretty much in that area.
Yeah, Member Hancock, I'm not sure how far that capability goes. I know that it's logged in the sense of any time that anything Axon related is activated, it's tagging the car, it's tagging our car or the officer's body cam. I'm not sure how far that goes when it's not active, even though a lot of it's running in the background. I just can't speak to how close that would be. But I know from a system aspect, if we do know a certain car was in an area, I can do a search by just what that LPR did in that car. I absolutely can. We can narrow it to a specific car of what that specific patrol car picked up.
And then, and I think our first meeting or whatever, I brought up about getting data entered into a hot list. Have you looked at that? So like, let's just use, for example, last night, there was the car that ran the stop sign, hit the other car, and that car hit the pedestrian. So let's just say that would have been turned into a hit and run. And let's say that pedestrian had been killed, and the other vehicle that was hit had gotten a license plate. How fast can we get that plate into the LPR system so that our system is looking for that car?
So, Member Hancock, so a couple things. One is you got there eventually where under policy, yeah, somebody would have been seriously hurt for us to get to that point
Right.
for it to qualify. But I think that's the part on that we want to be very careful about creating a customized hot list that maybe doesn't qualify for NCIC. And the reason is for all the things that we've openly discussed, which is we have to have a management on the backside of that. So let's just say we entered in 10 plates and that's one of them for whatever reason, right? We need to make sure if we take action on any one of those 10 plates that we have a system in place that we can remove that plate just like dispatch would with NCIC, so it's out of the system. Because what we don't want is for a hit, if let's just say we take action on that one plate, that one vehicle, and that for to stay in the system, and now that officer's stopping that person again and again because it's still in the system because we haven't managed the list correctly. So we want to be very cognizant of when we're ready to do that, we do it the right way, and the manage of it is appropriate and accountable as well. So as far as if that was the case, underneath the current system, you have 3 people that can enter that into a hot list, and that would be myself, Captain Wagner, or Lieutenant Dyke. So in terms of how fast, that was a case where I was still working. I was on my way home. In theory, I could probably do that within 30 minutes, 45 minutes.
30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30 minutes. 30
I don't know, 20, 30 minutes maybe. It's not instantaneous because you have to, it's a specialized Excel spreadsheet, and from there it has to grab it and pull it and enter it in. So it's not just something I can quickly enter and all of a sudden the LPRs are starting to pick it up. It's a little bit of a manual process to do that. So, so in theory, it can be relatively quick, but in practicality, probably not so much.
Okay,
And so Justin, to his point on that, this is one tool in the toolkit, right? Because the other tool is if you have that license plate, you're looking up to see who it is. First, like, right, and where do they live, and did they likely go home, and like, it's regular police work where this is an additional tool, right? I think that's the best way for us to think of it.
Yeah, and Chairman Blessman, I think you're absolutely right. And I use that, you know, in theory where you come up with some challenges, I think as investigators, when you have a partial or they misread the plate or it's a black truck. And scary enough, that's the exact same location when I was a shift lieutenant where there was a fatal hit and run of a 2-year-old right in that area. And all we had was a black F-150. That's all we had. And unfortunately, we were never able to come to closure with that case, but that would be the type of case where this would be something that would be invaluable to try to see if we can come up with something to start looking at closer.
Okay. Other comments, questions for Justin?
and you can split, so like, there's only 3 of you said that are authorized to actually input data, and I'm assuming that is the same as for who can do the lookups. But could you not say, expand the input, not the lookup, but who can put in, like a shift commander or dispatchers? I mean, we trust them with NCIC, you know, all the information. They hold the officers, you know, they're the first line of defense when it comes to a call and what that officer's going to, what they need to know. I mean, you're putting, as an officer, you know that they got your back. They're the only ones at the beginning of a call because they
Yeah.
got to figure it out.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And per our policy, it says a supervisor. So when we get to that point, if we find a responsible way to manage that correctly, I think that there are possibilities to be able to do that a little bit more efficiently.
And you know, I think from my perspective on that, I think those are feedback items we want to hear from the team, because again, remember my biggest hangups with the system are the storage of data and the searches. The hot list items, again, I'd rather not have any of it turned on, but those I can get my mind a lot closer to. And as far as who is authorized to enter a hot list item, if you guys have thoughts, I think we'd be open to those. And I just want everybody to understand that's what this committee should do. And we can take that and send it up to the council to work with you guys on policy. I think that's how that ought to work.
Commission, just real quick, I wanted to just talk about, as Justin has mentioned, we aren't ready for others to start entering things and whatnot. We want to make sure that we do step by step and make sure that we can control what we can control and that we're not making errors along the way that are correctable, because this is a hot topic issue and we want to make sure that we're on top of how we're going to move. As far as all the numbers I was listing, how many are ran and this and that, as long as there's a human being making sure that that information is accurate, it doesn't matter if it's 50, 100 searches, whatever, because at some point, it does do what it's supposed to. It's not the amount of them, of the numbers, and our officers aren't scurrying all over chasing those down, because if we found that out, as you already probably know, we'll deal with that piece. Our thing is safety and taking care of the community. And so I'm glad for the safeguards that the captain has put in place. And so we're going to move slow. This is going to be a slow process. At some point, we're going to talk about who can enter, searches, so on and so forth. We're not anywhere near any of those things. We're here now we're at the foundation, and we want to lay the right foundation. So that was it, Chairman.
Yep, no, that's great. Anything for the chief while he's up there?
Okay. I ain't saying much.
No,
Justin's,
that's
yes,
fine.
but seriously.
And that's perfect.
Yes, but I just want to make sure that the oversight that we all are looking for, we all talk about this and make sure that that we lay the right foundation so that we don't have the oops as much as we can control.
And so Justin, if I could, just to kind of continue some of the discussion here. So I remember one of the things that we talked about in an earlier session was, what we thought the volume might look like. This is obviously a relatively low volume of searches in particular so far. My guess is that everybody's being cautious, which that's great. That's great leadership. Okay, that means that you guys have gotten across to them what the expectations are. So my thought is that what we've seen so far are legitimate searches. Everybody involved agreed, and away we went. What do you think this looks like? I've asked this a couple times now. As we get to maturity, what do you think this looks like in terms of searches? I think the number we had maybe thrown out before was, I don't remember if it was 30 a week, 30 a month. It was the number 30 is what's stuck in my head. And I'm asking you to predict the future, but do you feel like there will be more to come, I guess is the question.
Chairman Bless, I think it's safe to say that there's going to be more. I think it would be tough to say that there's going to be a larger number than that, I think, but I don't think it's going to be extraordinary more than where we're at. I think that anytime you have a new system, people start cautiously until they understand it and all those different types of things. So I would anticipate more, but I wouldn't anticipate, a tenfold type as far as searches.
Yeah, and I think that's good. I think, and one of the reasons that was really pertinent to me was in reviewing, some of the Fargo data that they've had out with their portal. They have a significant number going through the system, and I think they've got a significant number of people involved. And just being honest, it makes me really nervous for them. Because as you look at the types of abuses that have occurred across the country, that in my mind is what breeds that, is where you get complacent and it's very easy and everybody just thinks, oh, this is just a part of my everyday. Nobody will even notice if I do this. I'm not seeing that here. And I know I keep saying it, but I want to say I appreciate it because this is what I was looking for if we're going to have this turned on. So I appreciate that. Okay. Anything else for Justin? So just for the committee's thoughts here, we're working on item 4 still right now on the agenda, just so we're kind of level setting. We'll hit some policy review things. The chief talked about that a little bit. More to come down the road. We'll be talking about, how does this all lay out? What are you guys comfortable with, and how do you help us get comfortable with it? I think in terms of policy, it feels like we're probably in a good spot, and I'm reluctant, since we're just getting started, to really go into depth with that. But if there is anything that you guys feel is important to talk about now, or if the committee wants to talk about anything policy wise, that's this point in the agenda. So, is there anything anybody would like to go with there?
So members of the committee, just so you know, one of the things we did at policy is we did training. We're just some housekeeping things within training. There's a part in there where it says storage and it says, portable media and things like that. That's not really applicable where we store this data. So probably just some housekeeping things to make sure that it really is actually in line with what we're doing. So, but as far as, we talked about under supervisor input of hot lists and things like that, that's already there. Those are the things that we will look at in the short term future as far as what's next, which is kind of laid out in the near term priorities and focus items, which is the hot list and different things like that, and just fine tuning some of our internal tracking and different things like that. We realized as we're inputting it, as you saw in that audit, that it looked just a little bit different, and that was all just because of our end on the user end as far as where we put the permission in. So we'll fine tune that and different things like that for the short term.
Yeah. And if I could have the city attorney come up, that brings up something actually that we have talked about in the past. This policy sits in a unique position in terms of the council's oversight, is my recollection. While we set certain parameters and ask the department to work underneath those parameters, in the end, we don't really own this policy. Is that the right way for us to think about it? So, and the reason I asked that is that Justin just mentioned a couple things that really ought to get updated in there, and they're housekeeping type things. If this was ordinance, we've got to fix it, right? We've actually got to do steps at the council to do that. This policy doesn't live in the world the same way. So can you just help us understand that a little bit?
Yeah, Alderman Bless and members of the committee. I mean, the way I describe where this policy lives is that this is within the police department's purview. But given the council's interest in it, I mean, I think they want to make sure, in the interest of transparency and to make sure that they're following the directives of the council, that they're keeping you up to date as to exactly what they're doing with it. So traditionally, a lot of the policy decisions that are being made by the police department isn't something that they'd necessarily bring up to the council level in most instances, but I think this is just an instance where in the interest of the transparency part of it, they want to make sure that the council knows what they're doing with it. It's new technology. There's been a committee formed to provide oversight for it. So from a policy standpoint, traditionally, this isn't something that I don't think would necessarily rise to the level of going to the council necessarily, or being an ordinance. This is just something, this is unique.
Okay, great. And so I guess my thought would be then is that this committee then becomes a good place, whether it comes in the form of red lines or whatever that is, because I think the committee could look at, if it's minor adjustments, should be pretty simple, right? I don't know that we have to take any action, but the committee itself could say, oh, that one rises a little above that. Maybe that's one we should send up to the council to at least be aware of. And, you know, again, I'm not saying that this committee has the ability to say yay or nay, they should or shouldn't, but I think it's a way for us to get it there. Does that make sense to you, or is there a different mechanism that works better in your mind?
I mean, I think this committee, it's specifically formed for the purpose of looking at this ALPR matter, but it could be applied really, I guess, to any issues that the Minot Police Department wants to gain some citizen insight into its policies and practices to make sure that it's aligning with kind of the general temperament of the community. That's kind of something that I would say, there's what's legal, like which oftentimes can be painted with a broad stroke or a very specific stroke, and then there's what the temperament of the community thinks is appropriate, and then there's who has the authority to make those decisions. Is it the police department, or is it the group of citizens that employs the police department to oversee its duties? So, I mean, there's a lot. It's kind of a loaded question as to how much wants to be filtered through this specific committee, or if this is the appropriate process. But oftentimes these PD oversight committees do wind up filling that role of, if the police department wants a sounding board to say, hey, this is how we want to apply this new technology. What do you think about that? That's something that I think this could provide the good citizen insight into how the community could perceive that.
Sure. And so it's maybe not the same thing to think, oh, it's a pseudo planning commission with legal requirements and hearings and all this stuff. But as you said, it could be a sounding board. And so as the chief and his team are working towards, hey, if we could adjust this piece, it would make a lot of sense to us and could make us more efficient or a better way to go. This is a sounding board for that, for sure. And again, I'll count on the leadership in the police department, who've done a great job of this so far, to involve the council, even if that approval isn't explicitly needed legally. And I think that's the way I'm thinking of it. And I think this is a good place to have those conversations in a public format. And I see the chief standing too. If you want to add something, chief, that's great.
And just real quick, that is our philosophy behind this. We're here to bring forward the wishes of the people, and we've heard that in the council. And so there's nothing to hide. None of my policies are anything that we're afraid of or anything else. It's technology. It's a tool, and I've said that over and over again. And we're going to manage it correctly. That is what you see here. You've seen I can only talk about my tenure. We're going to do what we can to make sure that we manage each and every step as best we can. But just know, because the biggest thing to try and to keep is trust. And we want to make sure that we maintain not just your trust, but the public trust as well. And so that's the direction that's always on our mind. And so that's why you'll hear me come up. But outside of that, I'm going to try and get out the way.
Okay. Anything else policy related for the city attorney or for the chief? Yeah, go ahead.
If I may, Alderman Blessum, I guess one thing that I have, if this is going to evolve into a committee that's looking into operations beyond just ALPR technology, the police department has a huge umbrella of things that they operate, the pound being one of them that's kind of a hot button issue. The public has a lot of insight into this is just one matter that they have kind of under their umbrella of operations. And so if the committee is kind of contemplating an idea of expanding its scope beyond just ALPR, my recommendation would be to bring that conversation maybe back to the council for further discussion and to decide exactly like kind of what scope they want that to be, what they want the committee comprised of. Do they want the makeup to be something different? Just kind of some food for thought for the committee itself to think about.
And I appreciate that, and I just to be clear with everybody, that is not at all my intention. This for me is focused directly on ALPR. The way that I think of PD oversight is that we employ a CEO and our city manager to run our city. And that's how we go about that, and he is our leader, and we count on him to work with the PD to do that. This one for me, ALPR specifically, nationwide, I believe, is a hot topic and something that I care passionately about, and that's why I'll continue to push on that. But it's not my intention to go further. Okay. Anything else for anybody?
Yes, I got one.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kylie.
Just broadly, not necessarily for you, Steph, more for the PD as a whole here. Do you guys feel that with the restrictions we've placed on this, whether, with a little wiggle room either way in the future, that this will still be a beneficial tool for you guys going forward?
Member Coleman, members of the committee, I think that when you look at the length, which I know has been an issue of discussion throughout the entire time since we talked about LPR. So I think the data retention is part of the issue. The shorter you have that, the less likelihood you are going to have something beneficial as a result of what it is. And we talked a lot in past meetings, I know, in regards to delayed reporting and all those different types of things. And all those all play a factor. So as you can see under long-term priorities, one of ours is to right now work with Axon to customize that retention to the 10 days to stay in accordance with the policy instead of the 7. So at least that's 3 more days. And so I think, like I said, used responsibly, absolutely. I think it is an invaluable tool as long as it's used responsibly. Sure. Yep.
Just for my curiosity, does Axon run the flock system also? Because like when we talk about Fargo, I know they use the ALPR, also they have flock.
Yeah, 2 completely different systems and companies.
Because like when you read go on the PD's website, like here they said they collected 382,000 plates, and they did 520 searches in the last 30 days. But it's like, is it ALPR data that's collecting the plates? Is it the flock data? Is it the flock system that's collecting the plates, or?
So I would say it's a combination probably of
Yeah,
all
but
above.
I mean,
So
and they
what-
don't really spell it out.
So what I can tell you too is that Fargo operates differently than Minot
Right.
PD for a number of different reasons. One is their operations are different. They run a real-time crime center, which are people that are actively running data in conjunction with their department investigation operations and dispatch as well. We don't have the staffing or the capabilities to do a lot of that proactive things that they're doing on that end, which I inherently, without a doubt, I know plays a part into some of those searches because they're able to work more quickly with the information that's in front of them. So that's about as far as I could speak to probably why those numbers are the way they are, in addition to the population that they're dealing with as well, as far as how many reads they're getting through the systems.
Justin, do you know what in-car solution they use? Do they use Axon as well, or do you know?
Yeah, in-car, I don't know.
Okay. But does Flock offer an in-car solution?
They do not.
They do not. Okay. So regardless, Fargo's using some combination, because I did remember reading something about their in-car system. So they must have some combination that does that for them. Okay.
Yeah,
and just for everybody's recollection, we did have an item come through the council looking at whether Flock should be put up on poles and light standards and all the other stuff that other communities are doing. At the time, we ran into budget constraints, which is, I think, why it didn't actually even get to a decision point for the council. I think PD actually pulled back a little bit on that, just dollars wise. And so, for me, that's a whole other step. I'm uncomfortable with all of it, but at the same time now, especially with the Flock brand, because they're in a whole different political space as a leadership team, even within the company. You're getting into things that are in a whole different layer. I think, again, if we're going to have this going, we're entering into it the right way. So I think that's the approach that we all need to take a look at. Chief, did you want to add something there too?
And I guess just before I forget, so there's 2 main companies with in-car LPR, and that's Axon and Motorola. They're the 2 main players. There's other companies as well, but they are the 2 main players in the in-car system.
And then just to add to that, when we were asking about where does this look like down the road, at some point, the captain and lieutenant are going to get burned out of all of this with the searches. And so I'm going to ask, once we get a foundation and we know what's taking place, you know me, I'm always going to come forward ahead of time and start looking. But I'm looking down the road. I would want to include my 2 street lieutenants as capable of being able to do it at some point. We're not there yet. We are just at the beginning of it, but at some point, so I can give my detective lieutenant some reprieve, because with that, with all of this, and as it moves on, he is going to be working 7 days a week, and that's not fair to him, and so on. So I just letting you know, as we look down the road, that's what I will be coming at some point saying, can my street lieutenants do the same thing that my detective does? Because they're part of my executive team, and we have to trust that they are going, and they're going to run it past us anyway. You have to. I get a text if the deputy chief's not around or whatever, I get the text messages, so on and so forth. Or our command group will say, I authorize this. Do you agree? So that's where we are.
And I'll just give you my quick perspective on that, Chief. We certainly will have the discussions as we go, right? Because you'll be bringing those. One of the things that's giving me comfort in this whole thing right now is that you guys can stand here and you know exactly how it's being used and what's going on. As we add more layers to that, and you're standing in front of us saying, you know what, I'll have to check into that and get back with you. That's where I start to get a little nervous in the whole process. So we'll grow together. The committee will grow right with you.
Right, but
Yep.
each of you, and I've dealt, you know that we're not going to stand up here and do that. We already know this is why we're prepared when we get here. And so that'll be the same. There will be a process. It will be laid out, and we will make sure that we know exactly what we're talking about. It makes no sense to stand up here and not have a clue where we're headed and what we're doing. I need to have thought about that before I even approach you. So, okay.
Great. All right. So I think at this point we'll move on to item 6, which is the committee discussion. One of the things I would like to do first to the city attorney, Steph, would you talk a little bit about if you guys were able to do some research on the Supreme Court case? Now I know it's not ALPR, but we've now got another case that is starting to govern in terms of essentially a dragnet of data being used in getting a warrant and in prosecution. And so it doesn't apply directly, I get that, but can you just give us a little commentary on that case and what you may have found looking at it?
Absolutely. So the case you're talking about is the Shatry case. I don't know if the committee's had an opportunity to take a look at it. I'd be happy to share a Supreme Court blog article I found that kind of broadly summarizes it. But the long and short, the facts of that case involve a geo warrant that was applied for after a robbery, where the police applied for a warrant asking for location data information that was kept in cell phones for a certain period of time surrounding that particular robbery. And so then what was deposited back to them then was cell phone information indicating here's X number of cell phones that were in this location. They gradually reduced that data down, and it led to an arrest in that specific case based upon that information. And so that was appealed up to the Supreme Court, and most relevant, to me in this case, isn't so much the cache of information that was provided. It was that the third party doctrine, which basically, and I'm broadly summarizing this in terms of Fourth Amendment law. This is far more complex than how I'm describing it here right now. But to summarize, the third party doctrine states that if you're going to share information that's confidential to yourself with a third party, then you lose your confidential protection over that information. So here, the relevant information was when you turn on the location services in your phone and you start sharing that information with Google, which is who the warrant in this specific case was requested from for that information, that they didn't lose, this individual, the defendant that was arrested, didn't lose his right under the Fourth Amendment to be protected from that search and seizure. Now, again, boiling this down a lot, this Fourth Amendment search still can be valid. What wasn't decided at the Supreme Court was the validity of the search itself. So that's been remanded back down to the lower courts for a decision. So what I want to stress in that case is just because they said yes, third-party doctrine like doesn't exonerate the PD from that specific search, it doesn't mean that that search itself may not be valid under other grounds. So one other thing that I think is really important to take from Chatry is when you look at it, there's a main opinion that's been signed on to by 6 justices, but there's also 2 other concurrences that were written. There's a dissent, where there's a primary dissent, I think, written by Alito, and then the first part of it is signed on by Barrett, the second part is signed on by the 3rd dissenting justice, and then Barrett still signs a dissent that she authors on her own too. So all that to say, like some of the largest, most brilliant legal minds in our community are at odds on how we get there. Like they agree with like broad overall principles, but some of the mechanics in these really fact-specific cases, they apply them and they get to the end means in different ways. So all that to say, like I don't think that we're probably far off from getting an ALPR case. They just have to find the facts that are going to reach there. But this, I think there's very distinct differences to be drawn with this case here. I don't think that this is something that's fatal to the PD's use of this by any means. Like I think there's distinct differences that can be drawn between the information that's in your cell phone and the information that PD is gathering with a camera on the outside of its car, going down a public road, picking up license plates that are out in the public sphere. I think there's a very, very distinct difference to be drawn with that information. But I'd be happy to share this summary here with the committee, if that'd be some interesting reading. It just kind of goes through some of the case, but like Councilmember Blessum says, it's not specific to ALPR. It has to do with the geo warrants that are issued. Kind of another term they kind of use to refer to them. And tell me if you guys have heard of reverse warrants, where they're asking for kind of large pools of information. And so just because there was a robbery in this place and Steph Stahlheim happened to be coming from the same bank and all of my location data is in there too, I kind of get caught in that net too. And so Fourth Amendment requires when you're going to review for a warrant that you have to articulate the probability that there's going to be information in whatever it is that you're searching that's probably going to lead you to evidence of that specific crime. So it doesn't mean that warrant is going to be overturned that was in this specific case. It just means that it has to be remanded back down to do that Fourth Amendment analysis and make sure that stands up.
So one question I've got then that just actually popped into my head, what we've had described earlier by the captain is, okay, somebody saw something and they saw a plate or a partial plate or make or model, whatever. We search that way and work that way. So that to me makes more sense. This is the opposite. This says there was a hit and run by the tree where the pedestrian got hit. We don't really know anything about the vehicles, what vehicles were in the vicinity. That's more of what Chatry was talking about is you happen to be there, Attorney Selheim was in the bank, and so you are automatically now on the list. And essentially, one way to look at it from my pea brain is guilty until proven that you weren't, right? Because you're on the list. So there's a chance it was you, and we're going to work towards who it was. But until you can prove to us that it wasn't you, you're still on the list.
And Councilmember Blessum, that's one way of looking at it. I think another way also an important distinction to make here is that the warrant was requesting information from Google. It was requesting information from a third party that defendant had said, yes, when I get this cell phone, I'm going to share my location with you and you can collect it. And we all do this. I mean, I don't know that there's a way to like turn this off on your phone. Maybe there is. But he agreed, yes, I'm going to give my information to Google. You can track me every 20 minutes. You can ping into my phone and pull my location out of it and figure out where I'm going and target your marketing towards me through that means. That's the information that they were asking from a third party, whereas here with our ALPR, we're creating it. So we're the Google in that instance. So if there's a warrant that's being requested, it'd be us like requesting a warrant from ourselves for our own information that we're gathering for these purposes. And some of these precautions that have been put in place here, I'd argue that we're going above and beyond what's required under this Fourth Amendment analysis to make sure that we're protecting people's privacy rights by making sure we have command staff looking at this data before we do these inquiries to make sure that it's going to withstand that muster before we go apply for any type of warrant or go before a court of law asking for access to that. So, I mean, I think that's an important distinction to make too, is that in this case, they're asking for it from a third party and asking a third party to cough up that information, whereas this is information that we're gathering simply by driving down a city street and taking pictures.
Yeah, I guess I would maybe argue the opposite point, which is that Google's a private company that whether it's a good system or not, they did get your permission to do that. Google also has no power whatsoever to take away your liberties at all. And so here we've got the government creating a database that's searchable and usable in that exact same way, in full control of it and able to take away liberties. And so for me, that's the chilling effect that we end up with. And that, again, that goes back to that whole thing about the chilling effect that can occur about going to a political rally that you don't want to be known to have been at, or to be in an area of town that you shouldn't have been because of the color of your skin or other pieces that go with it. And so I want the committee to keep in mind that while I understand your perspective on that, the opposite perspective I think applies just as closely. The other thing that I would say with it is that what you described that happened in Chattree aligns very closely with how I think the system can be used. And I guess, and maybe this would be for one of the PD representatives, it hadn't occurred in my mind that there really are two types, there's maybe more, but at least two types of searches that I've now identified. One is we have a pretty good idea of which vehicle we're looking for, and we go and we search for that to try to find it. But there's the other one that's the dragnet of, I want all 300 vehicles that were in this area because I think it's likely one of them that might have done this. Do you see a difference there in what we're seeing so far? Because Carpenter is the other case, and that's a credit card case, right? Mm-hmm. And that kind of found the same way, that these dragnets do not work. Now they're different because we've got this whole idea of the license plate being in public view and all that stuff, right? So that's where there's a difference there. But I guess, can you talk about those two types of searches and whether the committee or the department should be thinking of those two searches differently at this point that I described, which is looking for one or looking for 300 that could be, one of them could be?
So council, and I'll defer to PD too, but just a couple thoughts I have with that too is like, so the analysis that when you go ask for a warrant from the judge that they're going to look at for like whether or not this search is reasonable, they're going to look at the facts and ask that exact question. Is it reasonable to search this level of information, and will it reasonably lead to information that's going to provide proof of who did or didn't do this crime? And so that's something that's going to be taken into consideration with these cases too, is how particular is the affidavit that's being written? Are you asking for all of, using the bank robbery as the example, like are you going to ask for everybody who was in that block on the entire day? Or do you have information to believe that crime happened between 1:10 and 1:15, and you're asking for something that's as narrow as who is there within that specific window? There's ways that you can craft those affidavits to make it a more reasonable search versus what's an unreasonable search. You don't want to have everything for the whole month, but if you can narrow down the window and provide the evidence for why you think it happened there. The call to 911 came in on this particular date and time. The witnesses that were there said that he was only there for X number of minutes, and this is why they know that. They went on shift at this time. There's other facts that they can plead in these cases to help narrow down the window, to help them determine that analysis as to whether or not the search that they're asking to do is reasonable or not.
So if I could, and I want to hear Justin's partake too, but Steph, what you're describing about a reasonable search is not the search of the system in this case, right? Because the PD has everything it needs to perform a search under its policy today. We're talking about some other type of search that was done, because this brings me back to one of the proposals I had at council, which was I want a warrant for every search, right? That's not what we're talking about here. You all can perform whatever search you feel is necessary under policy. Now, they may use that search to get a warrant to search someone's house, right? And that's what the judge is going to rule on. Am I thinking of that right? And this could be a portion of it. So if you had to come to them and say, yeah, Your Honor, I searched for everybody that had passed by Sammy's around 1 p.m. and I got 221 cars. And from that, I was able to narrow it here, 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 and here. That's how I identified the original list. The judge is going to determine whether the ALPR search was valid to justify the warrant to search their house. Am I thinking of that all right?
So the judge is going to look in the totality of like the circumstances that are being presented in front of him. I don't know that I would go so far as the judge is going to be looking at our policy to confirm compliance or whether or not the search of our ALPR data was reasonable, because we own the data. Again, this isn't asking for a search warrant to go into Google system and search their data. It's we own all of it too. So we're placing more strict constraints on ourselves and our use of our data than I think that the law would generally require in our circumstances. I don't know if you have anything to add to
I
that.
think, I think to me, the basic foundation of how she's describing a search in that situation versus what is very, very similar in regards to it, right? So we could have a homicide and it's reported at 4:15 p.m. today, and we know it's in this area of town. The system will allow me to search all reads between a certain amount of time. But like you had just said, I have to be able to, our investigator has to be able to start chipping away at that. Otherwise, it literally is a needle in a haystack. And it does me absolutely no good to have 5,000 cars, right? I have to have some other means to validate why I suspect it's either this car or this car or this car. Because otherwise, just in itself, this mass dump of data or record in regards to that search does me absolutely no good as an investigator. And so you have to have some other means to narrow that, to have some investigative value that's what I'm looking for. Can the system allow us to do it in the way that you're doing and talking? Absolutely it can. But it serves me no purpose at all from an investigation side to have 5,000 cars over the course of 3 hours. It doesn't do me any good. So I have to be able to narrow that down or to have the system help validate what I already know or suspect.
So Justin, just to clarify then the search that you did perform, which was the commercial burglary, right? So what the idea there was someone thinks they identified the car. We think we have an idea of what it is. And so you were searching for that to see if it was in the vicinity? Would that be if you'd had all the cars on it, might have done that? At the time, it didn't quite do it. But that would have been the idea, right? Is that could you in any way place it even in the city during that time? Is that the starting point and then you narrow it from there? And again, I don't want to get into policing. You guys, I'm not trying to wreck where we're headed
I'm
here,
going to
but
be careful with talking about that case. So I'd rather use the hypothetical.
sure. Yeah, that's fine.
So
That's fine.
I'd rather use the hypothetical, and you're absolutely right. That is one way where that search can be beneficial for me. Is that vehicle even in town? Where was that vehicle at this specific time to match with maybe surveillance video that we had from a business? All these different types of things, right? I could take a video from a surveillance or from a business, and it could show me a black SUV, but we all know surveillance video sometimes stinks. Blurry, all those different types of things. That's what I see. In addition to that, I have a former employee that resigned. Didn't go so well. Well, guess what? They maybe have a black SUV as well. We run a search and we then pinpoint that vehicle, maybe that suspect was, that former employee, was 3 blocks away as we were responding to the incident. That then will help us guide that in regards to, okay, now we know you weren't here. We know at least your vehicle was in the area and or potentially leaving the scene of a crime. So there's a number of different ways, honestly, that it could be used, but that would be one of the more common ones, to try to pinpoint that and either validate what I already suspect to further my case or to give me a starting point. But even having a starting point, I have to have a pretty tailored, very specific search in order for it to provide value for me. Going back to maybe a fatal hit and run. I could pull every vehicle type of thing, but I need to be able to pull, is it an SUV? Is it a color? Is it something that will help me get that list here? Because a wide mass data dump is going to be very, very difficult and in fact, probably near useless as far as from an investigative value.
Okay. All right. Anything else on the Chartree case or anything related to that? Again, just for everybody's benefit, again, it's my contention that we are headed towards an ALPR case in front of the Supreme Court. And so the question will be, what does that come to? And I think at least with today's court, we're starting to get a picture of what that could be. But until it gets there, and I guess I'll caution all of us against the idea that Well, heck, until they outlaw it, we should just do it. Okay? At some point, as Americans, we decide we don't like it. And so we'll see where we get to, and we'll see how this continues to progress nationwide. I mean, this is, just one anecdote. City of LA just terminated their flock contract. Now, they're not walking away from ALPR. I don't want to put that out there that way. But they did terminate their flock contract over privacy concerns and data security. And so we've got to be on top of this and make sure that we are in a good spot. Axon flies under the radar a little because they don't have the name flock. Right now, there isn't the same scrutiny going on with that. And so I think we just want to be cognizant of that, of where we're headed here. Okay? Committee, anything else for our team? Okay. I think we're in good shape then. Chief, once again, thank you. Nice work. Steph, thank you for your work on it. We appreciate that very much. We are ready for item 7, which is
Move
adjournment.
adjourn.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We're adjourned.